So people, it doesn't get any better because there are now two bosses on stage. So Bas van den Berg, and he will be talking about connecting university education with societal transition challenges. The floor is yours.
I'll try my best. I also feel I have to be a bit fast for the program, so I'll do my best. Thank you for the honor of being here today. I'm the acting coordinator of a research center in The Hague, Mission Zero, and an external candidate here. I'm going to talk about an emerging field of education called regenerative education that aims to connect universities with some of the grand challenges of our times. For many of you, this report is probably familiar. It was published about a week ago, and to be really honest, when I read it, I didn't sleep that night. And not because there's anything particularly new about the impact of climate change in the report, but the context of it being presented by some of the world's biggest diplomats really upset me personally. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, said, the rich countries collectively are guilty of setting arson to our only home. And that impacts me as a teacher, as an educator, as a researcher. What many of you probably know is that we are dealing with times of interconnected crises. On multiple fronts, we are transgressing, going beyond, disrupting the social and ecological foundations and barriers that allow humanity to thrive, that allow life to thrive on the earth. Part of these transitional times also call for large-scale transformations. Transformations in what Daniel Wall would call the way that the human presence on the earth is designed. Wageningen University itself is also committed to a fundamental 6 of these transitions, acting on them like new forms of food, new forms of circular economy, well-being. This also raises an educational question. If we are committed to tackling these transitions, how do we then ensure that our education connects with these transition challenges? How do we make sure that our students have an opportunity to engage in tackling some of these grand challenges that will impact them probably more than it does us now and their children and grandchildren? That's exactly what the emerging field of regenerative education in the literature aims to do, to connect with these types of transition challenges with the intention of bringing back those transgressed barriers into the safe and just, equitable space for humanity. What we don't know yet is how to do that. And that's what we've been trying to figure out, and we are not there yet, so please consider this all as work in progress. What we've done is a podcast-based study. So we essentially interviewed 26 different educators all over Western Europe who are already engaged in this practice, in connecting their education with some of these grand challenges like circular economy, the energy transition, or the transition towards a plant-based protein. One thing we also asked each of the guests was to highlight how they would describe such a form of education, or what they would hope for such a form of education. And we've asked them to do that in the form of a metaphor, which we visualized. I'm a designer by training, so I really like to draw, which you may notice. One of the guests on the left highlighted that for students, engaging with transition challenges in such a way is a bit like learning to swim in the open seas. There may be some buoys along the way to help guide you, but it's really hard. It's really difficult to connect with transitions. It's really difficult to connect with real-world systemic change that has a lot of different multi-stakeholders. Another guest highlighted how these forms of education could act as a form of a lighthouse, illuminating the future of a particular challenge that we're heading towards in a particular place, assessing whether that fits in those boundaries, and if not, proposing alternatives. How can we redirect it? Can we make changes? Now, because there's more than 20 hours of audio, it's a bit less than the previous guest, and I don't have the time or your patience, I think, to play all 20 hours. I would like to let you in on a little teaser. So here's 2 small bits of 2 different episodes with some of these educators.
So if every student feels like they're part of a bigger thing, like something that matters, something that is required now, and we always need something that is both urgent and relevant. So it needs to be important, and it needs to be important now.
And it's not easy. I sometimes literally feel my heart race when I come up with ideas of letting go of parts of control and keeping half of my curricula open and undesigned when going into a course. handing over the design of a final role play assignment in my master course into the hands of 3 or 4 students, which will completely design the final assessment and evaluation, including the form, together with me, but it's really in their hands. And letting go of that control is it's a leap of faith every time again.
Yeah, perhaps we need a bit more leaps of faith to be able to tackle some of these grand challenges. Like I said, we've conducted 26 of these episodes, interviews ranging from 40 to about 80 minutes, so some of them are quite long. What we've done with them is using a method called narrative of transition mapping, which combines insights from applied narratology, or the science of stories, and transition design, or an approach to create systemic change, to try and find relational patterns, to try and find patterns across all of these different contexts in Western Europe, to see how are these educators, how are these trailblazers actively connecting their practice with transition challenges. In doing so, we identified 7 fundamental design practices that occurred across all 26 examples, 21 design questions that can help guide educators in redesigning or designing their own practice to engage with transition challenges, as well as 21 barriers that have to be navigated as a teacher, as a student, as an institution when doing so. And many of them were actually psychological, mostly our own fears as a teacher, like the guest just highlighted. We're now in the process of translating this into a workshop toolkit, in an approach, in a set of items that can be used by educational design teams, so students, teachers, researchers, practitioners, business people, together active on those transition challenges. To do that, we've been working on many different iterations of trying to translate all of these 26 interviews into something that people can easily and intuitively work with. There's a few walls in my house that are just filled with these types of drawings. But this is the working version that we have now. So this is the Regenerative Education Design Practices Toolkit. In the outer parts, you can see the 7 design practices that were identified from all of these educational trailblazers, like tackling a relevant and urgent transition challenge. So tackling something with your education that means something for the students, that means something for the politicians, for the practitioners. Cultivating personal transformations. Engaging with this is difficult. It's like swimming in the sea. It changes you as well as it changes the system. Or being open for emergence. Reality is complex. Sometimes things change. We have to make adaptations in our educational design. What you also see is that there's multiple arrows going in different directions to identify or to highlight that this is also, engaging with these practices is also a design practice. It's not a blueprint that we are creating that we can give and say, this is now a course that connects with transitions. We're trying to identify the different ingredients, and much like in MasterChef, where sometimes they will give you a mystery box, you can give the same ingredients, but someone will create a completely different meal. But the magic is in the cooking. As I'm getting close to finishing, there's something I would like to share that I also share with my own students when I'm teaching. That's questions or gifts. And there's very few questions there's better few gifts, than better questions to give or to receive. And I'm very much looking forward to receiving some gifts from you in a few minutes. Before I do that, I would like to give you some in return. So what if our education, all of our education, could connect with some of the grand challenges of our times in our local context and places using some of these practices? What if all universities in the Netherlands, maybe even beyond, could be transformed in a way that they tackle these grand challenges? The theme of this year's Dies is rethinking higher education for 2030 and beyond. So my hope is that by 2030, any student going through Wageningen or any other university will get to meaningfully engage with a form of regenerative education, to make a change, to meaningfully engage with one of these transition challenges. Using the QR code, we'll send you to a webpage where there's a summary of the different podcast episodes and the major streaming platforms on Apple, Google, etc. And I'll leave this on during the Q&A so you can take out your phone and have a look if you're interested. And I'd like to leave you with one of my favorite quotes about education in the latest book of Gert Biesta, the philosopher. He says, "Education is a thoroughly practical art, and educational sciences ought to inform the artistry of others." My hope, our hope, working on this project is that with the tool, with the podcast, with the study, we may play a small role in informing your artistry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I found it very inspirational, personally. Questions from the audience and also online. There's a bit of a lag, so I'd first like to invite people in the audience here so that people online can type their question. Any comments, questions from the audience? So I don't see any hands. So, sorry. So yeah, no. I'm blinded by the light. It's a lovely song, by the way, Blinded by the Light. But.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the inspiring presentation. It really triggered me. My name is Rio Pals. I organize student challenges outside of the curriculum. We just had a conversation about challenge-based learning in education, actually. And I was wondering, where do you see the differences and the similarities between regenerative education and challenge-based learning?
Well, first of all, it's a great question, so thank you. So where are the differences between challenge-based learning and regenerative education? I would like to say that I would see challenge-based learning as part of a regenerative approach, where it was also one of the 7 main design practices that were identified. But that alone is not enough. And also just only doing that in the extracurricular parts of the program, I would really much like to inspire and make the case that that's something that should become part of the standard bachelor and master's approach. So I would like to see it as part of, yeah.
Great. There are very nice comments in the chat on your talk as well. Here's another question, Jannik.
Thank you to the chat.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, thanks for your talk. Sietse Sterrenberg, I'm a study advisor, and we just launched a master program in governance of sustainability transformation. And it feels really native to that program also, and so I'm definitely will connect or forward your information to the design team of the program. But I wondered what exactly the tool is. Is it like a toolbox that you can use to redesign a course or a program or review it, or how does it work?
Yeah, so that's what we are now working towards, to create that toolbox, like you said, with the part of the redesign in brackets. So maybe there's also people that want to redesign new courses, and also a big compliment to the Governance of Sustainability Masters. It looks really cool. But yeah, we are definitely looking for educators who would like to help further develop that toolkit by using it on some of their own courses, or bachelor or master students who would like to do research on this topic as well. Yeah, so I'd love to connect.
Great, that's excellent. Ken, that's the last one before the break, I think.
Sorry for dragging you over again. I found your talk really inspiring. I think the idea of trying to engage with these big challenges is fantastic. We did have some attempts earlier to embed the Sustainable Development Goals in our education here in Wageningen. Mm-hmm. What intrigues me, though, is why you choose the title Regenerative Education, because in a sense it sort of, does that imply everything else is degenerative? I don't know. but because, I mean, this word regenerative has got a very loaded meaning, I think, these days, particularly around our field of agriculture. And it's really being hijacked and moved in a very strange direction. I just wondered, why the term regenerative?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question, and it's also something that really concerns me, because when this field started to emerge in the literature, it had that former connotation with regeneration as trying to go back from exceeded boundaries. And you're right that it is indeed being hijacked a bit, and perhaps we need to change at some point the wording, then it becomes more of a strategic communication question. But the purpose, to say that all education is destructive or degenerative, that's obviously not what we're trying to do. Although I think a lot of it, at the very best, is neutral in the sense that it doesn't necessarily contribute to bringing that back. So there's both a strategic communication part to that question and also a bit of how you look at sustainability and the challenge that we have. Yeah, thank you. Really nice question.
Thank you, Bas. And I would like to invite you all to applaud for all the speakers for this first session. Very nice. We now take a break. We'll be back here at 11:30 sharp.